Good morning. Good morning.
Hey,
Hi, Monique.
hey,
Oh my
Salida.
gosh. It's like so great connecting with you. I know I was saying earlier that I did not even realize that today is a holiday. Still getting used to documenting and remembering the US holidays. So thank you very much for being here today. I appreciate you spending this time with me. For everyone connecting, thank you very much for being here. This is Women Making an Impact Live. If you're new to this series, welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm your host, Solita Roberts, founder of Style to Impact, which is an image coaching and personal styling agency geared towards women empowerment through style, giving women the clarity, confidence, and closet they need to increase their income, impact, and influence. Thank you very much for joining me. And today I have a very, very, very special guest, which is kind of like interesting that we're in the same location, but we've never connected. It's the first time we're connecting. So we're going to actually change that sometime in the future. And it's just so amazing. Like one of the power that I find with LinkedIn is being able to connect with different people, right? And I think part of which is kind of like the topic that we're talking about today is quite fitting because we're talking about mastering the art of communication, how to communicate better so that you can get the life that you want. And my expert guest today is Monique Russell. She's a communications expert that you will want on your team. Like I'm just telling you, just from meeting her and following her on LinkedIn, this is definitely somebody that you want on your team. She teaches women leaders and teams how to have positive and productive relationships at home and work using effective communication tools and strategy. Monique have 20 years of experience. I mean, that's if that's not another reason why you should have her on your team, definitely, connect with her. 20 years of experience in the science of communication and leads clear communication solutions. An international training, coaching, and consulting firm that focuses on, oh, I think I read that wrong. I always do this. You have 20 years of experience in the science of communication and leads clear communication solutions, an internationally training, coaching, and consulting firm that focuses on confidently communicating from the inside out. I love that inside out because we have to become self aware, right, to be able to become effective communicators. Monique is also the author of Ultimate Speaker's Guide and the book International Motherhood, Who Said It Will Be Easy, and host of Bridge to You podcast. Thank you very much, Monique, for being here today. I appreciate you spending this time with me. Like, I know, like, when I thought about it, as I said to you when we were offline, when I looked at it, I was like, oh my gosh, I was prepared, kind of, sort of, to if we had to cancel, but I'm happy we didn't cancel. And I'm happy that we can have this space to really talk and just have a different conversations. I came with notes. I usually don't. I usually I come on here and it's like, yeah, we talk and see what happens. But I came with notes today because I wanted to ask specific questions. So thank you very much for being here. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Salida, for having me on the show. It's going to be fun.
Yes, it is. And I think the automatic connection as well is that we're both from the Caribbean, just different parts of the Caribbean. I'm from Antigua, you're from the Bahamas. What would you say it's like? And now that we're living outside of the Caribbean, I think I wanted to, it wasn't a question that I was going to talk,
That's
like
all
I
right.
thought about, but now that I'm thinking about it, in terms of how we communicate as expats, so to speak, living in a different country, what are some tools do you think that we should adopt? Should we, people talk about code switching. Is
Mm-hmm.
that something that we should do to be able to communicate effectively with people within a different culture that we're in? Or should we just remain ourselves?
Oh, my goodness. This is good. So, well, first off, I say let's just back to what the whole communication purpose is. And the goal is for it to be effective, right?
Yeah.
And that means that we are exchanging information, we're understanding each other, we're putting ourselves in the other person's shoe. Now, growing up in the Bahamas, this is a different culture. We
Yeah.
communicate differently in the workplace. There's a hierarchy system and structure that's very much revered, very much respected. Even the way we greet people, Mr. and Mrs. So and so,
Yeah.
right, in the workplace. And here in the United States, it's much different. It's much more relaxed. We have a different type of culture, a different form of communication. But at the end of the day, it still needs to be effective. As far as code switching is concerned, I don't think, when I think of communicating, the difference between the Caribbean and then communicating here in the US, excuse me, I don't think it's a code switch. Hold on one second.
Sure.
Getting so excited. my throat is like, oh, she got something to say.
Yeah.
So, but here's the thing. So when we are shifting or we are connecting here in the United States, and we have this cultural awareness from the Caribbean, it's about being able to understand the culture. So what needs to happen is knowing and understanding the landscape. I think too many times we come from our home countries and we think that we're coming with everything that is superior, and they just do it wrong. Yeah. They speak wrong, they talk wrong. Why are they trying to get in my business or whatever have you? But I think there is a misconception or a misunderstanding between being authentic and then understanding the environment that you're in. There's always context that has to be taken into consideration. Someone may say, well, I just feel like talking like this, and whatever I want to say, I gotta say, just like that, right? If they say something to me, what are you talking about? Just like that. Someone in the Bahamas could understand what I just said. But if I try that here, I may be creating distraction and confusion for myself. It doesn't have anything to do with me not being myself, not being authentic. I'm still Monique. I'm still able to speak in my dialect as needed, when needed. But in this environment, in this context, it's not effective. It's not appropriate, because now I'm creating some sort of distraction in between me getting my message across. So I say the first thing people need to do is understand the lay of the land and find the similarities, find the differences, and know how to navigate, as opposed to just being very reactionary, being very complacent, and not taking intentional action to make sure that their communication messages are being received.
Yeah, that's a good point that you made. I think I've said this while we were offline, that I feel as though I've been an immigrant all my life, right? And it's being able to get into those spaces and say, how can I show up as myself? And at the same time, ensure that when I'm communicating with those persons around me who's from a different culture, they dialect may be different from mine. How do I communicate effectively with them to ensure that my message, whatever my message is, it's being translated in a way that they understand? As a from one Caribbean person to the next, we can use our specific dialect for each country, and we'd be like, yeah, I kind of sort of understand what you're saying, right? But when we do step out of our when we do step out of our bubble, so to speak, in those respective countries that we're from, and we get into international countries like the US or Europe or any of those places, I know personally, it's like, I still want to be myself. Like, I still want to say I'm trying to think of, like, for instance, in the Caribbean, we will say, well, at least I grew up with sneakers, as in the shoes, right? And some persons may say tennis. And I remember I was on a speaking engagement and I used a word that's only in the Caribbean. And I was like, oh, crap. And I had to be like, oh, well, this is what we would usually how we would usually refer to it in the Caribbean. And I know here, this is what you say that. But do you find, I know we're going on this different tangent, but it's kind of
interesting. I love it.
Do you find that as immigrants, though, we have to, in order to communicate effectively, we always have to be the one that switching, and goes back to that code switching that I'm talking about, that where we have to like change our dialect. You wouldn't use your Bahamian dialect, the local Creole, but do you find like we have to then adjust the words that we use in order to be understood, whereas we can speak the Queen's English for us coming from the Caribbean, we can speak in a way that, yes, I would assume you can understand me, but why is it, do you feel as coming from the Caribbean, we have to always do that switching though? And I want to say, before you answer that, I want to say good morning to Stella. Thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate you being a part of the conversation. Thank you very much. And it's good evening. Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Hey, Stella. Yeah, okay. So absolutely, we get to do that, right? We get to be able to diversify how we communicate and express ourselves because we are multifaceted. We are able to use our dialect when we see someone who is from another Caribbean country,
Yeah,
and that helps us to shorten the life cycle of the know, like, and trust factor, right? Getting to know you. Effective communication always includes some element of that know, like, and trust factor. So we get to have those other tools as weapons in our toolkit to facilitate a faster connection with others. But like I was saying, like in the context of, let's say you were talking about sneakers and tennis. So
yeah,
that was an excellent response that you did, in the moment. And then it just creates a new level of awareness to anybody who is listening. I remember when I was in Minnesota, we were at the grocery store, and I was looking for, in the Bahamas we call it a trolley. And I went and I was asking the person because there were no more trolleys, and I mean, for the life of me, I was like, the trolley. I can't find a trolley. I need a trolley. And he
yeah.
was like, "What's a trolley?" I said, the thing you put the food in, that you push when you're shopping. I mean, it was like a 10-minute conversation. And then he said, "Oh, you mean a cart?" And I was like, "Yes, a cart." And so now the next time I go, if I need to, I'm just going to ask for a cart.
Yeah.
So yeah, we get to do that. We have a great opportunity to learn different nuances, different lingos, but I mean, it's all a part of the communication process. It's not something where I'm saying, well, just because I want to communicate in my local language, in my local dialect, means that I'm not being authentic or being, myself, because I'm in this environment where they may not understand my local dialect. I think that's where a lot of people get it confused, where they're like, okay, just because I want to do it, being authentic means I'm doing what I want to do, when I want, how I want, without any regard for the context. And that's a false belief. Because, I mean, let's just face it. You may have a school teacher, someone who's teaching, and she loves to drink margaritas. But in the context of her teaching at school, she's not going to drink a margarita.
Yeah.
Why? Because it's not the right context. It's not the appropriate time. It creates a distraction. It doesn't allow her message to be delivered in the way that she intended. But it doesn't mean that she's not being authentic. It doesn't mean that she's not being herself. She's aware and she understands that in this moment, these are the communication tools and strategies I need to use to move toward my goal.
Yeah, yeah, that's absolutely true, and it's kind of like, what are the tools for effective communication, whether or not it's in the workplace or in your personal life? Like, what are some of the tools that we can adopt, and what does good communication looks like?
Yeah. So, and these are universal principles, universal tools. Me being able to put yourself in another person's shoe is one of the biggest skills of anyone who is desiring to be an effective communicator. It's also one of the most difficult. It's also one of the most difficult. Being able to listen intently to what's being said, not being said, understand how you're coming across. All of these are tools and skills that we could develop. The biggest thing I feel, from what I see, especially in my practice, and just in general, from where I hear people are challenged or struggling, is in the area of conflict resolution, conflict mediation, conflict negotiation. And, the US spends $359 billion a year on conflict in the corporate workspace. That just tells us, how much of a challenge it is. And it's that time where you are in that space at work and you know that something is wrong and you are afraid to address it, perhaps from whatever your belief is about conflict. Maybe you've learned to withdraw. Maybe
Yeah.
you feel you feel if you say something, you're going to hurt the other person's feeling. That's one that comes up a lot. So it's working through your own areas of self-awareness so that you can be more effective when you're communicating at work. And it's also just understanding what to say and how to say it. So we know what we need to do, but a lot of times people will ask me, well, how do I say it then? How do I say it? Like, how do I tell this person that, what I delegated to them is not done correctly? How do I say it without feeling bad? How do I say it without hurting their feelings? They're always asking for how do I say it? So I think the skill is really becoming self-aware and learning the language of how to say it and in a way that communicates respect and still moves the conversation forward.
I think self-awareness for me, it's the biggest thing in every area of our lives. Once you become self-aware, whether or not it's self-aware as to another person's culture, self-awareness in terms of how another person communicates, self-awareness in knowing that, okay, you may not have all the answers, that you have to seek someone else, seek out someone else for it. But that level of self-awareness, I think it's the key ingredient to making us better humans. That's how I look at it. Because whenever something does come up, a conflict does come up, you're not looking at it from the perspective of, okay, how do I feel? Or, this should not happen. I told that person to do X, Y, and Z, and we're beating our chests, and we're the ones that feeling the impact, and we feel as though that person did us something wrong. Whereas we can look at it and say, okay, being self-aware by looking at that from that person's perspective. Is it a case where they did not understand the assignment? Is it a case where maybe there were 2 or 3 words in the way I communicated what I wanted wasn't clear? Is it a case where that person was not aware that they were doing something, or saying something or not doing something or whatever it is? I think that level of self-awareness allows us to think about the other person, right? And it is a difficult thing to do. Whereas for me, self-awareness came from the experiences that I would have gone through in life, from growing up in a third world country and then moving and just kind of like going through those different challenges and recognizing that, okay, everybody is going through different things, and I have to find a way to maybe bring my point across or maybe say what I want to say. And being an introvert as well, which is something I want to talk about later, is that the way I would approach something is not necessarily the way someone else would, right? And I think that level of self-awareness is what helps. But how do you become self-aware enough to be able to master the art of communication? Because to be self-aware, if you're not self-aware, to me, you'll never get to that how. Like, how do I say it properly? And then, of course, there's the receiving part of it, where, yes, you may be communicating, but there's also someone receiving it. The receiver also needs to be self-aware, right? So how do you get yourself to that level of self-awareness so that both receiver and the giver, it's like, okay, we can get that balance and be able to have an amicable discussion, solution, whatever it is that we're looking for.
Okay, so we're all self-aware. We're just aware at different levels of different things about ourselves. We are aware about our practices, our behaviors in certain areas, maybe how we handle pressure or how we handle stress, perhaps. Okay. But there are other areas in our lives where we're not, where we have different levels. Maybe it could be in the aspect of us being able to make decisions, or we're procrastinating. Maybe we don't know the best and most productive time that our bodies work. And all of these things take into consideration how we communicate the time of day, our energy levels, our ability to make decisions. Are we procrastinating because we don't have enough information? Or is it because we don't know how to do something? Or are we missing resources? There's a lot of different elements and factors that go into self-awareness. So it's not one big ball, right? Yeah. So that's the first part. The other part is to become like an investigator of yourself. Like you really need to become a student of yourself, learning how your beliefs were formed, why they were formed that way. You know, we in our childhood years, most of our beliefs are formed before we reach our teenage years. And we carry some of those patterns with us consciously and subconsciously. But then as adults, we still just operate from those default practices and those default behaviors without really exploring them or understanding them. So you can begin to ask yourself questions like, what was normal for you when you were growing up? Like, what was normal for you in the area? I know you talk about finance. What was normal for you in the area of, leadership? What did that look like? How was conflict handled? Where did you learn to love yourself? Like, who taught you how to love yourself? Because a lot of times people are very critical, very self-critical, and we hear all of those: I should do this, I need to do this, I have to do that, as opposed to accepting who they are. So where did you learn that? How did you develop those beliefs? Where did they even come from? Who did you see doing that and you modeled it, or you chose not to take it into your practice? So becoming self-aware is really exploring everything about yourself, where you are now, where you were before in the past, even some of your aspirations and your goals. Who do you look up to? Who do you admire? The things that you admire in the people that you look up to, there are qualities that you're admiring because they're also inside of you.
Yeah.
Right. So it's really taking a holistic, comprehensive look at yourself and understanding those pieces. Then you also want to go and ask people who are close to you, just go ask people you trust, respect, who would be honest with you. And a lot of times people are not honest because they don't want to hurt your feelings.
Yeah.
That's why feedback is really something we have to appreciate. So asking people around you very specific questions about when they saw you happiest, maybe. What was that time and what were you doing? Or when they saw a time when they saw that you were very upset or sad. And then start to put the pieces of the puzzle together to see comprehensively how you see yourself and how others are seeing you. This is just going to give us a broader perspective to understand if there are areas where we really want to strengthen and we want to become more effective. Once we develop this practice internally and we're looking at people who are giving us honest feedback externally, we now have more understanding and awareness to see that, okay, Salida might be struggling in this area. I can give a little bit more grace and compassion because I understand what's going on in my own body. I understand what may be influencing my own decisions. And I understand that I'm not my decisions. I'm not my thoughts. I'm not my ideas. They're just ideas, just the same way that someone else's idea is just their own idea.
Yep.
So that it's a symbiotic relationship. We don't ever get to that point where it's like, I've arrived. I'm a master at this. It's done. I'm never going to make a mistake or never going to upset somebody. That's the perfectionism goal coming in. So we're not even striving to master this in a way where there's never going to be an issue or there's never going to be a mistake. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to have challenges. I mean, I've been in this field and I've studied this field and taught and coached for years. And you better believe I got some mistakes. And I'm going to continue to make some mistakes. So that's a part of the whole process too.
Yeah, I think that's important. What you said there is understanding that you will make mistakes, but it's a learning process, right? You're not going to anything in life, going and say, okay, I am going to be perfect at this, and you adopt two or three tools, and then you're like, yes, I'm a master at it. Even though we're talking about mastering the art of communication, it is not where you become an expert, so you're no longer learning, but just finding the tools that work for you, or identifying where you're going, not so you off track, and to get yourself on track to be able to communicate better. And without it, we keep saying it, like, you can find lots of books, the effective communication, the importance of it and why it's important to do it. But sometimes I think, like, from my own personal experience, I know, okay, communication is important whether or not it's work or relationship. I also know it's necessary to happen. Do you find that, because this is something I realized I think I should just kind of like give the context first, is where if I find someone is bad at communicating, like they don't talk, they don't, like you ask a question, you get the feedback is like really minimal. So as a result, where I am a communicator, like I want to talk, I'm one of those persons, I want to talk it out, right? I may take a moment for myself where I need to step away because my self-awareness knows that, okay, don't open your mouth if you're upset. Like, I know that's not going to work because it's not going to be constructive. It's not going to get me to that point that we can resolve the issue. So I need to step away. Stepping away gives me the clarity in knowing how to approach it. But I find, like, if that person is not effective, like, or they're not making an effort to communicate, that affects the way I communicate with them. So how do I, in my instance, and I'm sure we have other listeners that probably experience this, how do you, as the person who want to talk it out, as the person who wants to better the communication, but then the receiver is not necessarily that way, how do you get that person on board, or what do you do in that instance?
Mm-hmm. Beautiful, beautiful. So I'm going to tell you a story. But before I tell you a story, I want to say we have to remove the labels of good and bad when it comes to communication. So if someone's not talking, it's not bad. That's communication. 80% of communication is nonverbal. And if we are really aware, we're paying attention to the nonverbal, not just the verbal. So here's my story. So my husband and I'm a mom. I have 2 boys, and my husband and I have been together 21 years now. And he is someone who is an analytical thinker. He takes time to process. And me, on the other hand, I'm like you. I want to talk it out. I'm a big picture person. I'm a big thinker. And I remember when in the earlier years of our marriage, I would have all these ideas. And I mean, we would be sitting down and I would say, this is what I see for us in the next 5 years. This is what we could plan. I would have all sorts of conversations, and he would be like, mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, hello, like, did you hear me? Hello, did you hear what I just said? That's all you have to say? I done say all of this thing for how long? 10, 20 minutes? And that's all you have to say? And I would become upset. I would be like, you know what? This is why I'm not saying anything to you anymore. And the reality of it is, as much as I was teaching, I think I was teaching at the university at the time. And even though I was teaching theoretical, practical, I wasn't applying what I was teaching. And when I realized that, you know what, I need to actually take what I'm teaching and put this into practice in my own home, I went and I did assessments for both of us, for my children, to learn our communication styles. And I understood that, okay, he needs more time to process. When I got this information, I realized that this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to say what I need to say. And I'm going to say, I know you need time to process. Let me know what you think. Sure enough, 2 days later, he'd be going to work, driving in his car, and he'd give me a call and bring up what I talked about 2 days ago. So did I get the feedback? Yes. Did I get it right when I wanted it? No. Was it effective? Absolutely. So I couldn't stay in that space of labeling him as not being a communicator. He was communicating. I just wasn't aware of how he was communicating and how he needed to communicate. So when I became more aware of my own style, my own practices, it opened me up to understand his a little bit differently. And I changed my approach. Still the same Monique, still genuine, still authentic, but effective, more effective.
Yeah. That makes sense, right? Because I'm now thinking, which kind of like have me thinking now as to what are some of the ways that we communicate, like as individuals, because we're all unique and we're all different. And as you said, just removing that bad and good from communicating and labeling it that way is, what are those, like, communication itself, how do we communicate? What are the different aspects of it? And how do you, I mean, you did the assessment. Where can we find the assessment to do that?
Sure.
To figure out what is our communication style? Because I think that's what happens. We're not effective in communicating because we don't recognize how the other person communicates.
Well, first, we don't recognize how we communicate. That's
Oh,
where we start.
okay.
We start with our own self-awareness. And I think so many of us focus on the other. They're not communicating. They're not doing good. They're not. But the reality is, we don't understand how we're communicating. We don't understand that we are feeling tension when we're not getting an immediate response, or we're not understanding that maybe the timing isn't right. I could give you some stories about me and my 15-year-old kid. It'll have you rolling, but and I wouldn't want anybody to put it on display because it really wasn't good at the time. But I had to understand, especially coming from the Caribbean, when it comes now into the space of parenting, because communication is communication. It doesn't matter where you are.
Yeah.
You may think you're communicating in one area effectively, but I can guarantee you, after being in this space for all these years, the patterns tend to show up. And I will tell you, surely if there is one area of your life where the communication is not really being effective, it's spilling over into other areas because you're one whole human being.
Yeah.
So the assessment that I used was DISC, DISC, and that's actually one that I use in my practice. But I have to say a disclaimer, Salida. There are hundreds of assessments out there. Yeah. The assessments are not the end all be all. I will tell you right now. I don't want anyone listening to us to say, I'm going to get it and that's it. Like we done,
know, right?
We done. I already know so many people are like, look, I need to check box 1, 2, 3. So it's not the end all be all, but it gives us more insight, more awareness. And with more awareness, we now have choice. We have an opportunity to choose to do something differently or change our approach to be effective. That's the goal, to be effective. If we're moving towards a more effective communication, then we're getting more clarity and understanding into how we're showing up and how other people are showing up. We could still learn and we could see how we communicate and still choose not to do anything and feel like, you know what, this is just the way it is. This is how we do it here, which are phrases people really use in real life in the workplace. They're aware of how they're coming across, but they choose not to. They choose not to make an adjustment or make a change to make the communication more effective. So I'll say assessments are great. I love them. I'm an assessment junkie. I give them to my kids and I take everyone that comes up.
I honestly, before we get to that, I want to thank Joy for stopping in. She said this is really good. So thank you very much, Joy, for stopping in.
Yes, Joy.
On assessments, right? Honestly speaking, I've done the DISC assessment. So I have that one. I think at first when I read it, I was like, this is not me. Like what are they talking? I was like, this is not me. I think after going back at, reading it again, I was like, okay, I can see some similarities, but I've done assessments and I'm like, I am not that person.
You in denial, Salida, okay? You in denial.
I'm like, I am not that person. Mm-hmm. But over the last 2 years, I haven't done like any of those assessments. But what I've done is a self-awareness assessment. Mm-hmm. Because I found within the last 2 years, and this is something that I'm hoping to like one day talk about, where I felt as though I've lost my identity, like who I am, what I'm supposed to be doing, my place in, because I'm a person, there's certain aspects of my life that I'm a creature of habits. Like I love doing different things and knowing when I look at my schedule, it's like, oh yeah, I have this coming up next 2 weeks. Like it's a reoccurring event, It makes me feel whole. And so as a result, I had to look at if because I was feeling this way and I'm still kind of feeling that way, where it's like my identity, I'm still like, I'm reimagining myself and what that person looks like. If my communication skills as a result, or the way I communicate as a result, it's being affected. Do you think like going through that process, because we change over time, experiences and everything's happening in our lives, do those changes that we go through affect the way we communicate with each other, the way we interact? And how do we know whether or not the message and the way we're communicating is effective and is being received by the other person?
Mm-hmm. So first, I want to say kudos on the identity transformation. We are all constantly going through identity restructuring, development as new information comes on board and through our life experiences. So kudos to you. Be gentle with yourself and don't feel as though you haven't figured it out yet, because half of us haven't figured it out yet either. So I think the time period that we're in right now is great for that. Now, as far as like, does our communication change? Yeah, it changes in the environment that we're in. It changes as we become more mature and more wise and more aware of certain things. But effectiveness is effectiveness. And effectiveness is whether our message is being received, whether we're being clear, whether we're putting ourselves in someone else's shoes, whether we're being kind, being loving. Those things don't change. Love is love. Kindness is kindness. And so when we talk about being present for someone or listening, really like active listening, those things don't change at all. It doesn't matter if we're in our teenage years or if we're 75. Like, it is what it is. It's the outcome. It certainly is. But as we are changing, yes, as we're developing, we may have new approaches to become even more effective. So in the past, maybe we took on an approach where we felt that we had to prove that we were credible with our degrees. We had to prove that we had all our certifications, and these things meant that we were on track. And maybe now in another time period, we're feeling like, well, I don't really need to communicate with those as my credibility points. Maybe I could bring more of my hobbies or my interests or my personality. So the approach changes. The goal of any of those approaches, whether you're communicating with your degrees and your credentials, and you're communicating with your personality and your hobbies, the goal is to be relatable. The goal is to gain respect or to gain the admiration of the people that you're communicating with or your audience. So how you do it, the approach that you take may change, but the outcome is still going to be the same.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. For a moment there, I was thinking, okay, as you're changing, as you're growing, or you're going through that identity shift, or in some cases, some people are going through an identity crisis, where maybe your attention span and your tolerance level becomes so like your patience, you just don't have it. And kind of like had me reflecting there in a moment for myself. It's like, okay, were there any point in this change that I'm going through that my tolerance level was low? Like, was that was that a way of something that affected the way I communicated and the way I was getting my message across? I read recently that, this book that I was reading that says we all talk, but the challenge is getting people to listen, right? That is the challenge. Sometimes we do a lot of talking and we're not in the reverse, where we should do less talking and then more listening. And also, how do we effectively listen to someone? Because I don't know if you've heard it, like the saying in the Caribbean as well. It's like, my grandmother would ask me, okay, are you hearing me or are you listening to me? Right? It's like, I'm hearing you, where it's like, na 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 na. I'm listening to you, where I'm paying attention to your message, paying attention to the different, like, what are you trying to communicate to me? What direction you're trying to get me into? And, kind of like had me going back there to my childhood and even present day as to if those shifts that I was going through in my life and still going through, if it would have affected in any way how I communicate. And, kind of like, even like in the business space, as business owners, or maybe persons in the corporate world, how do we communicate effectively to get our message across so that we can stand out?
So, okay. Well, first, let me say this. If whatever happened in the past, maybe you're wondering if the way you communicated was impacted, and I'm sure you're talking about if it was negatively impacted, because nobody ever asked. I don't know if in the past my communication was positive
Yeah.
and effective. So it
That's
sounds
good.
like you're thinking, okay, maybe did this hamper some relationships? Maybe did this keep people away?
Yeah.
Just the fact that you're asking that's a great question. And I think if you sit with yourself and you actually write, answers to that question, you'll find the answers. And even if you did burn bridges, even if you did have negative in the past, it's okay. You can change. We can't go back and correct everything from the past. Even as parents, there's some things that I did in the earlier years that I know it was not the right thing to do. But when I became more aware, I went back, I had a conversation and said, you know what? I can't go ahead and erase what I've done in the past. This is what I've learned now, and this is where I plan to be in the future. So I would say, give yourself grace, give yourself compassion and understanding that, yeah, maybe I may have made some bad choices in the past. I may have burned some bridges. Are there bridges that I'm still concerned about? If I can review them, if I can repair them, or do I need to release them?
Yeah.
So going back and addressing those things. And in the workplace, it's the same thing. I had someone in one of my workshops, and she asked the question, and she said, there was a situation where she said something that was, not appropriate to one of her direct reports. And it was like 2 years ago. And because we were doing an exercise that was bringing up a lot of these communication hurdles and challenges in the workplace, like such as if we're fatigued, when we're tired, when we're stressed, we begin to get short with people. And in the moment, she said something that she knew was extremely hurtful. And obviously this was still bothering her because it came up 2 years later. And she said, well, it was 2 years ago. Do you think I should still address it? Yeah.
The fact that you felt that, I'm sure the
Yeah.
person on the receiving end still feel a bit of, definitely.
Yeah. And even if we look at family relationships, if we look at sibling relationships, it doesn't matter. Parent relationship, it doesn't matter how many years a hurt or a misunderstanding happens. There can be a lot of liberation for people if they say, this is what I'm now aware of. I am sorry. I want to make it right. This can happen for many people who are waiting to have an open, honest acknowledgement of something that may have gone wrong when they didn't intend for it to do, or maybe they did intend to do it, and then they want to go ahead and course correct it. So that is one aspect I see missing in the workplace when we talk about effective communication. People are afraid to apologize. They're afraid to make things right, even if they've been wrong, because of how they're going to be perceived, if they're going to come across as weak, if they're going to, be rejected. What if you apologize to that person and they don't accept your apology?
Yeah, I that's honestly speaking, I'm of the mindset, if you come and apologize to me, I'm like, okay, yes, I can give you some leeway. I'll be like, okay, but I'm an action person. So I look at, it's not your words, but your action. Because you do have some persons who will apologize because maybe someone told them, made them aware of what they said wasn't appropriate, or maybe, I don't know, they had a moment and it's like, I should not have said that or done that. And then they apologize. But then I look at the next step. What actions are you taking? Right. Because for me, communication is not just verbal. It's also, it's the nonverbal. And I put a lot of my emphasis, at least this is how I knew that whether or not when that person says something to me, how I'm receiving it, it's like, what is the next action that they're taking? If I come and say, Monique, I am sorry that yesterday I yelled at you, or for the past 4 or 5 days I yelled at you and I did it, whatever, but tomorrow I'm doing it and the next day I'm doing it again, then that's, to me, my action is speaking louder than my words.
Exactly.
Right. And I think sometimes when we talk about communication, we tend to focus a lot on the spoken word, whereas sometimes our spoken word and our action conflicts. And as a result, we're not getting that message across that we were hoping to. It says like, oh yeah, I apologized to Monique. I told her I'm sorry. But looking at it, you're like, but you didn't change the action,
Mm-hmm.
right? You
Yeah.
didn't change the action. And I think that is what you were saying there, is just recognizing that, okay, you made some mistakes, because we all do. We all
Mm-hmm.
make mistakes. And now you become self aware, knowing that, okay, I made the mistake. Let me go. It's not big. I'm not bigger than my mistake. I am a human being. We learn, we progress, we're supposed to grow as well. And recognizing that, okay, I can say I made some mistakes, and here's what I'm going to do to course correct if I can, or be better in the future. And it's not just saying it, but just taking those actions to get it. And that's like my biggest pet peeve, is when people use the
Yeah.
words but don't back it up with the action. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how do you get the two to marry each other? Because some persons will be, yeah, I apologize, but not recognizing that the repeat action is why you're not able to get the results that you want.
Mm-hmm. So that's where I think authentic communication is. That's what I think authentic communication is, when your words and your actions are aligning.
Yeah.
And when you are doing what you say you would do, or you're practicing what you preach, that's what I feel authentic communication is. So we can't change anybody. We're not responsible for changing anyone, but we are responsible for how we operate in those spaces and in those environments. And if you're having repeated behaviors that are not helpful, then by all means, remove yourself from that environment, remove yourself from that environment. But what I find is, a lot of times people are not, they're willing to receive, but they're not willing to give. And life is about give and take. Life
Yeah.
is just really like cyclical process. And so what we put out a lot of times is what we get back. For
Yeah.
example, we're both on LinkedIn, we're on social media. We are engaging in other people's content. And as a result, other people will engage on our content.
Yeah.
So it's like it's a cyclical thing. If we want people to listen to us, then we should go practice listening to others, like really listening, being there, being curious. It's all a cyclical process. We want someone to forgive us of something that we've done wrong, then we should start forgiving others of what they have done wrong as well. But I find too many people have a checklist. They're expecting everybody else to fall into that thing of what they should do. But if they had that same checklist and they turned it around to themselves, they'll notice that they're missing some of those things as well. So
Yeah.
I think that's where the self-awareness comes in, seeing everyone first as someone who is human, someone who's doing the best that they can. We're all doing the best we can, right? And really giving people grace, understanding that for me is the essence of effective communication. If we're always holding people to these rigid standards and these unrealistic expectations, and she should have known better, she should have called me, she should know that I didn't mean she should turn in the report at 5. All you look at the shoulds. Look at everything in your life that you feel you should do, others should do. And that's where we begin to expand and explore expectations. Are the expectations unrealistic? Are there any areas in the expectation that we could provide more clarity? If someone makes a mistake or they turned it in Tuesday and you thought they should know they should turn it in on Thursday, is there any room for clarity in that expectation?
Yeah.
Is there anything that I could have done to make it a little bit more clear? Don't assume, just really look at those expectations. And then the more clarity you infuse into the conversations, that's when your message becomes more effective.
Well said. Well said. I think for my biggest takeaway, it's self awareness, having that clarity, and just giving yourself grace as well through the process. I think it's important. Now, I want to talk about introverts like myself. Whereas sometimes we feel as though I'm speaking here, like I'm speaking on behalf of all introverts, like we all operate the same.
It's the introvert flag, right?
Yeah, it's like, woo, we all operate the same. Like, no. So I've also, like, in my own personal life, even like business as well, I'm like, is being an introvert affecting the way I'm communicating, affecting the way I get my message across? So, do I like to talk everything out? I do that within my inner circle. Like, you're in my inner circle and I have an issue with you. I honestly don't, like, even if it's at work and you're in that inner circle, I don't do the Monique upset me, I'm going to go mumble and grumble to someone else. Like, that's a no no for me. I will step away from you for a sec because I need that space between us, but I'll come and have that conversation with you. And I'm one of those persons who, at that point, I'm like, okay, do I, like, there was a point in my life I will tell you exactly how I feel, the way, like, in, whereas now I'm trying to adopt a little bit more tact. Like, okay, instead of saying, Monique, I was really mad at you. I don't use curse words, but I may say it in a very, the tone of it may be a little bit aggressive. So now it's more of toning that down, but still being bold enough to say exactly what I'm going through. And I kind of like thought about it. If it's a, as an introvert, if my way of communicating is being affected because I'm not that outspoken, I'm not going to, I'm not getting on social media and constantly have like different levels of conversations, or I'm not going to be that one that's going to go into a room and be like, yeah, hey, everybody, how's going, what's going on. I'm that person who's going to stand on the side and find out one person who kind of sort of looked like my vibe. And that's where style came in to play for me, because one, I would wear things so that people can approach me, right? So they'll be like, oh, I love that top, I love that shoes. And that starts a conversation for me. And I will also, whenever I'm in that room with people that I don't know, I look at it and be like, okay, oh, I love her shoes or her vibe. Maybe the person said something and I was like, oh, I love their vibe. And that's how I'll kind of like warm myself up to going to that person to talk. Do you think there's a difference in communication when it comes to introverts and extroverts?
I mean, sure, there's a difference. There's a difference in how you capture and restore your energy, and whether it's infusing energy into you or it's draining energy. And I think everyone has the time period where they need to be, recharge. But as far as the introversion, extroversion, we all have aspects of it. Some of us have it more than others. And I don't like when you use the story with your inner circle, it didn't sound to me that it was an introverted, a reason for your introversion, because the people that were close to you, you don't have no problem saying anything at all to them.
Yeah.
So that's a matter of trust. You build trust, you feel valued, you feel respected. Even if someone's outside of your inner circle and you trust them and you respect them, I don't think you'd have a problem saying what's on your mind. So I don't see it as an introversion, extroversion challenge in terms of speaking up. I see it from a communications aspect of building trust. We were able to confront people when they are doing something that we feel is out of line, when we built that trust, or if we have the how to, like you say, now in the past it was a little aggressive,
Yeah.
but that how to say it, how to say it. With the inner circle, you have the trust. So whether you say it good or not, you still have stuff in the bank to recover. You have relational currency in the bank to recover. So it could come out with curse words, which I don't have a problem with. Okay. I used to say it all the time in college, but now, of course, it's much different. I've evolved, but every once in a while, you know what? Something's going to come out. So, I mean, with that inner circle, you have so much relational currency with them that it doesn't matter. And they know you, they'll understand you, they'll take time with you. When we don't have that relational currency with someone and they have done something wrong to us, then we're more concerned with how we're going to deliver it, because we know that it could impact that relationship on a long term. And then we maybe have to do a little bit more work in order to bring it, to a place where we feel comfortable or mutual with it. And as far as like the extroversion is concerned, with introvert people who are introverted, that's just the way they prefer to communicate. It's not something that's like ineffective or not effective. You just have a different style. In the same way, you'll see people who prefer to do video, and it's something that they enjoy. They love communicating this way. It gets them results. It's effective. You may have someone who wants to do writing, who loves writing. That's the way they prefer to communicate. And in their writing, all they write is a few sentences. And oh my God, it's so thought-provoking. It's so engaging. So it's just a matter of embracing your natural style and your energy. When you try to do something or be someone that you're not, that's the inauthentic portion, where your natural style, we flex in different styles and situations. But if 80% of the time you're putting yourself in a situation where you are going against your natural body norm, you're just creating additional stress for yourself. And sooner or longer, your body's going to respond to that type of stress. You're going to have issues sleeping. You're going to have issues digesting foods. You're going to have a whole lot of other issues, because now in your quest to say, I want to be more of this, so I'm going to put myself in a situation where 80% of the time I'm forced to do this, you're just creating additional stress for yourself. That's where the awareness comes in. This is the way I prefer to communicate. This gives me energy. This gives me strength. This gives me joy. I do know at the same time, I need to be flexible. So I'm going to create opportunities to challenge me and stretch me. But those opportunities that challenge and stretch me should not be so many or so large that it overtakes and drains me constantly, because now I'm not effective to anyone, including myself.
That is powerful. And I think that is like the right footing to end this. It's like, we shouldn't add any more to this. Is that message there, I think, more than anything, is what should come from this conversation. Be yourself, communicate the way that you're most comfortable with. I think, especially in the social media age, where we're told that we need to adopt these different facets that's happening in order to be effective, and then we lose who we are in the process, or added stress because you're trying to create videos and that's not who you are, right? But yes, you can add videos, but don't make it where you're now moving away from your passion of writing to add videos because someone told you you should do that, and then the way you communicate is not as strong as you would using your words. So I think that is a great point of really being able to communicate effectively so that you can get the influence and the impact that you need. So thank you very much, Monique, for being my guest today. But before we go, I like to have like a little bit of fun where we just kind of like relax a little bit. Of course, bringing it back to style and wardrobe and closet. I'm going to ask you two questions. One, celebrity or anyone's closet that you would like to raid. Whose closet?
Oh, oh boy. Who would I like to raid? Why are you trying to put me on the hot seat
I
here,
don't
Selena?
know, because you have to now think about it. Because
I have to think.
the process, I'm going to give you the story behind it once you answer why I ask these questions for my guests coming up next. For the other guests, yeah.
Let me think. Well, I like how Barbara Corcoran's, some of her dresses and her style, very, elegant, powerful looking. So perhaps Barbara, Michelle Obama, she has some pieces that really pop and stand out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are two great women and with great style. And here's the reason why I asked this question, because sometimes most of us as women, we're in that space where we wear the same thing over and over, and it's kind of like, but there's that side of us that wish that, oh, I wish that I can wear that dress. I wish that I can wear that dress that Michelle Obama wears. She looks so great in it. But when you become self-aware of that desire to wear something else outside of what you're wearing, then you start to explore different avenues when it comes to your personal style. Hence the reason I asked for it, because sometimes we want to do and we want to try new things, but we get stuck in our day-to-day. But if someone asks you the question, then you start thinking about it. You become self-aware. When you go shopping now, you start thinking of, what can I add? I remember that dress. I like that dress. Can I find one like that? Right? So my second question,
love that.
This one has no connection to, in terms of style, is just like, I just want to ask it. If a movie is being made about you, who would you like to play you? Female actress, of course, because this is about supporting women.
Who I want to play me in the role?
Yes.
Oh, man.
Oh,
This is so hard
favorite
because
actress. Thinking,
I
yeah.
maybe Angela Bassett.
I'm
Yeah, maybe
sorry. I'm having
Angela.
I'm having a moment because that's who I'm like. Yeah, I
Yeah.
need Angela to play me. There's so many things about her that I love. I'm hoping that when I'm 60, I can look like her.
Yes.
I'm putting it
Yes.
out in the universe as well. I want her to play me. I would wish, that's somebody I want to meet, but at the same time, I want to look like her when I'm 60. So I got to start doing the work now. But no, thank you very much for participating. And obviously, thank you very much for being here today. This was so packed with so many gems, so many things that I can use, tools that I can use as well, and strategies that I can use to work on my communication skills. And I'm sure the audience as well is able to, grab some gems. Of course, inviting everyone to follow Monique. I mean, if you want to know more in terms of how to work with her, how to work on your communication skills, obviously I'll drop those connections in the comments. But Monique, how can people get in contact with you?
You can reach me on my website, clearcommunicationsolutions.com, or just connect with me here on LinkedIn. I mean, I'm here each week, so connect with me, send a message, let us know that you saw this episode and you enjoyed it, and then let's continue the conversation.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you very much, Monique, again for being here. And to our online guests, viewers, if you're watching the replay or you watch it live, thank you very much for being here and spending this time with us. We appreciate it, and we will see you in the next episode. Take care. Bye.